Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us, Perspectives on Inclusion. This program is dedicated to educating the general public about issues that are of importance to the disability community, and we believe that as you view this, you'll realize that those very same issues are important to everyone because people with disabilities certainly are a fabric of the community at large. Hello It's Us, Perspectives on Inclusion is brought to you through a collaboration between the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, our good friends at Uptown Bill's Coffee Shop, and the good people at Public Access TV who are assisting with the production. My name is Mike Hoenig. I work at the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, and I serve as co-host for Hello It's Us. Keith?
I'm the other co-host, Keith Ruff. I'm a disability advocate, retired, and trying hard to write a book.
It's going to happen. Feel it. Well, we've got a great group of guests. This is part 2 of our series on accessibility at the University of Iowa and the members of the A-Team, as we like to call them, the accessibility team. We have in studio with us Brian Monternock, who is the accessibility coordinator at UI Facilities Management. We have Mark Harris, who is the director of UI Student Disability Services. We have Kurt Corey, who is the director of University of Iowa Policy and User Services. And we have Todd Weissenberger, who is the IT accessibility coordinator with the University of Iowa Information Security and Policy Office. So welcome back, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So in part 1, we talked a lot about accessibility and some of the accomplishments that within the departments and just sort of a broad overview. And within part 2, we're going to break it down a little bit and get into some more specific examples. And I think, Keith, you were going to lead us off with Brian.
Yes, Brian. I have noted over the years your input into the Old Capitol area where there were steps. Now there are none. Could you describe how that process worked?
Sure, and as you mentioned, it's definitely a process. And that's really how I think of accessibility and disability. It's a process.
Yeah.
There's never an end to it. There's no end state. But anyway, we had within facilities discussed for years. Of course, and many times I think we think of our Pentecost as really sacred ground. Nothing's going to change, But there's always been those steps there. There's 5, 6 steps wherever you went, and so whenever we would have events, whether it be the Jazz Fest or whatever on that Pentecost site, it really created some problems for people to maneuver through, to navigate through the Pentecost area and things. So anyway, our good folks in our landscaping crew, we had discussions, and of course, they thought it would be great if they didn't have to shovel those steps, and the man hours it takes to maintain those steps and painting railings or whatever that and administration kind of gave us the go ahead to you can remove those, and so we removed them, and now so they're much easier to maintain, much quicker. It's more efficient, and honestly, I think everybody has agreed it just looks just as nice, if not better, than it was with the steps, and so it's just made it more usable to everybody and easier for facilities to maintain as well.
And it really blends in with the whole area. You can hardly tell there were steps.
Yeah, it looks like it should, the way it always was. Yeah, and I think that's I think kind of important, or I think that's how we do kind of understand. That's accessibility at its best. When you don't even notice it, it just blends in, and I think that's when it works the best.
Yeah.
Piggybacks with the concept of universal design too, right? Think about the number of people that are going to benefit not just people with disabilities from not having those steps there.
Exactly, it benefits people Well, it benefits somebody riding a bicycle, for instance. Somebody if they're pulling their luggage or pushing a stroller or...
And parcel post.
Exactly, yes. So yeah, it typically makes it more usable for everybody. It just becomes more user-friendly to everyone.
Well, on that note, just in terms of accessibility and just making things better, I know that, Mark, you've talked a little bit about some of the work that SDS, Student Disability Services, does in terms of accommodation. I don't know if there are any other items that you would like to share just in terms of anything specific that you're working on or new initiatives. And I also know that you have some information from faculty and staff disability services. Nathan, the director, was unable to join us tonight because of a prior commitment. So anything from your end that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, sure, Mike. I think one major change that has happened is that a lot of the functions of SDS are now completely online for our users, starting with a web portal where students can apply for accommodations directly into the web portal, fill out an application where they talk about their accessibility needs, and then upload documentation for our review. The other thing that's been really helpful for our students is at this point now, a student can go onto that same portal and download the accommodation letters that they take to the faculty in order to receive their accommodations. So the bulk of those things before, I think, were in a lot less convenient form. And I think that we got a lot of feedback from our students that they appreciate the chance to go in and download the letters as opposed to coming in and meeting with an advisor in our office or picking them up at our front desk. And what that has allowed us to do is to focus much more of our energy on students in their first year at the university. During that transition to campus, I think, is the most important time for students in general, but particularly for students with disabilities. And also as they return to the sophomore year. So if you look at the research, if a university can successfully help a student return for their spring semester of their first year and for their fall semester of their second year, it's much more likely that the student will have a path towards graduation. So those are some pretty exciting developments.
Those are. I would think with the online application, one of the things that it brings is anonymity, so that, you know, I don't know if this is an issue anymore, but I know that with certain disabilities there's so much stigma that, like, a student may say, oh, I don't want people to see that I need help or that I need an accommodation, but if they can do it from the privacy of their computer, they have that extra level of confidentiality that I mean, you have practiced confidentiality for years, but obviously students may not always know that, at least when they first start to connect with you. So
I think those are important issues, and fortunately we've seen a great reduction in the stigma associated with needing academic accommodations. And the students that are coming into the university very often have been successfully accommodated in high school. So they're aware of what the accommodations are, they're aware of the need to self-advocate. When a student actually enters the post-secondary world of college, then the student possesses the confidentiality for their status as an individual with a disability. And what that means in practice is that there is no indication in any of the university databases that an individual has a disability that's working with our office. The fact that we use a system of accommodation letters as opposed to notifying faculty on a student's behalf is also important from a confidentiality standpoint. We'll prepare a letter in the portal for every one of their classes. Students can choose which ones they download and which ones they present to instructors. And it may be for a particular student, if their accommodations are limited to those related to exams, and a course doesn't have any examinations, they may not actually download the letter at all.
Okay.
a lot more flexibility.
A lot more flexibility.
Mark, over the years that you've been here, along with the advent of high tech, have you noticed more, I don't know how to put this properly, more severely disabled people coming to school?
That's an excellent question, Keith, and we certainly have. And I think that is a testament to the ability for the university to accommodate students that have a wide range of disabilities. I think what was happening previously is that students that might have a more severe disability were opting out of the college experience or assuming that they weren't able to attend a college in a traditional seat in the classroom model. And those students, I think more and more are coming to Iowa, understanding that they could have that traditional college experience and that the university will be responsible and responsive to their needs.
That's great. Kirk and Todd, we talked a lot in the first segment, and I plead guilty to this because I'm passionate about screen reader accessibility. But sometimes, unfortunately, I tend to overlook some of the other types of accessibility that are out there. And so, actually, for those of you that watched the end of the first segment last week, we talked about the Office of Patient Experience, and the two women that were presenting yesterday were talking about different types of accessibility, and they talked about even things like sip and puff technologies for people that do not have the dexterity to maybe even manipulate a mouse or to type or to do any number of other things. So as the percentage of students with more significant types of disabilities has grown, have you seen changes in the types of consultations that you're out there providing, not just for students, but maybe even for faculty? Or is that changing the face of assistive technology in terms of the way you have to think of it now?
Well, I think it changes the way that we help technologists develop their technologies. There are some very specific ways to create technology that's usable by a broad number of assistive technology in a wide variety of modalities. So, for example, as I've said many times, if you have a picture on a website, then that picture needs to be presented in an alternative textual format. And then that simple act opens up that content to delivery through screen readers or through refreshable braille displays or through other kinds of outputs. And by the same token, building a piece of technology with different types of input mechanisms where a lot of people might traditionally use a mouse or a swipe. With the right forethought, you can make a product usable by speech command, by sip and puff, by keyboard activity that's rendered old school with a head stick or a mouth stick. I mean, there are just once you start thinking in those sort of universal design terms, and creating these more broadly accessible systems, the sky's really the limit.
That's exciting to think about. This is going to make the campus more and more welcoming, I think, over time. One of the things we were going to talk with Tiffany a little bit about today in her role as ADA coordinator is just the recognition of the ADA, and we talk about that some just even during our ADA celebrations. We are fortunate here in Johnson County to be able to celebrate the anniversary every year. But I'm curious, do you think just in general, anyone can respond to this, that have we gotten to a point on campus now where most people are, at least, I'll go that far to say either supportive or at least to say, okay, yes, we know the ADA exists and we're going to do what we need to do. I was really encouraged during the last segment, Mark, to hear you say that that's happening with faculty. I'm wondering if, as you work, the rest of you work with other departments, if that same sentiment is becoming more and more the norm.
I think that it really has changed a lot over the years. And one of the things that I've noticed, a lot of times when Todd and I are in a large meeting where something's being presented, especially something having to do with technology, one of the ways that I know that all of this is working is when somebody other than us is the first person to raise their hand and say, well, what about the accessibility? That's for me a really good sign that it's not just, well, we'll wait for the accessibility experts to say that people are thinking about it on their own. And you talked about the folks in the Office of Patient Experience. More and more we find people are coming to us, not to say what do we have to do, but how do we do it right?
Yeah.
And so I see at least on our campus, there really is a growing awareness, and there's a growing desire, really, to do things in the way that's best for everybody. And one of the things that we like to do is, whenever possible, remind people that it's more than just accessibility. When you think about things from a universal design standpoint, when you're doing things right, everybody benefits from it. And you know, the obvious example is the curb cuts, and you need a curb cut for a wheelchair, but you also need a curb cut if you're pushing a stroller, or you need a, you know, if you're dragging something heavy with wheels. And that just applies so broadly. So when you talk about things like captioning videos, obviously it's essential for somebody who has a hearing impairment, but the example we always like to tell people is, you know, when you're sitting in a noisy bar and you're trying to figure out what's going on in the basketball game, and there's a basketball game going on right now, you know, you can't tell what's going on in the basketball game unless you've got the captions there. The captions are benefiting everybody. Without the captions, nobody knows what's happening.
Right.
And, you know, I think we see a lot more awareness of these kinds of things now.
And I've noticed a lot of older Americans are using it more and more, especially the curb cuts.
So, you know, you talk about situational disabilities where you might not be disabled all the time, but in a particular situation you're disabled. So I have kids and they're noisy, and when I'm watching TV, you know, without the captions, I can't tell what they're saying. So, you know, it benefits everybody.
Absolutely. All kinds of situations. Brian, I wanted to turn to you for a minute because I was just sitting here thinking about kind of the combining a number of these initiatives. Mark talked about students being more confident and being more ready to self-advocate. We've all talked about the benefits of accessibility and student retention, and one of the programs on campus that I've been fortunate enough to play a small part in is the Hawkeye Accessibility Ambassador Program that works to help students to become even more self-confident in their skills as leaders by working with design professionals, architects, engineers, and so forth to educate them about the need for accessibility and universal design on campus. And Brian is the person who, along with our colleague Carly Armour with Student Disability Services, have really made these matches work in terms of Carly is out there identifying students, and as well as our other advisors at Student Disability Services, and Brian then is there to educate on universal design and create some opportunities for them to really have some real-time learning experiences. So would you be up for talking a little bit about the program, Brian, and maybe even some of the successes that you've witnessed since the program's inception?
Sure. And so yeah, you had mentioned Carly, who works in Mark's office, Student Disability Services, and yourself. You serve a major part of that initiative as well, with sharing your experiences and helping train the students, you know, to self-advocate and become leaders. It leads us to think more stringent and stuff as far as, you know, who are we designing for? You know, we're really designing for all people, future generations. We don't know who the next student, what severe that disability might consist of next year, and so it's been, I think, very successful. We see that the architects and engineers really seem to get it when the actual students, the students we are there that we're charged to serve at the university are there, and there's these connections made, and people just really start to understand how people do experience design differently. And so I think they've become much more receptive, in the architects and engineers have, to kind of molding their designs differently to be more universal design. And I think the biggest, you know, thing is the students themselves. I think we're getting some real success factors with the students. We talked about retention and graduation, and nothing greater is than employment, you know, after their graduation. We just very recently had a a student who is a member of the Hawkeye Accessibility Ambassador Program, and he's got a great testimonial on the Hawkeye Accessibility Ambassador website, and how he goes on to talk how he started as a very shy, reserved student, and if it wasn't for this program kind of getting him out of his shell and kind of into the real world of things, that he wouldn't, developed as the way he did and succeed the way he did. But anyway, that's it's been a great program, and it's a fun program too to actually engage with the students.
Well, I was excited to see the email last week, I think it was from Carly, because, as any new program, it takes a while for something like this to take hold. And, you can't, because you have to pitch it. And Brian and I had, well, I'll speak for myself, I had a lot to learn. I remember when we were going to put a training together, and it was going to be, I don't know, was it 6 hours or something? And Carly said, "You guys can't be serious." And so we got it down to like an hour and a half or something. Anyway, so now that we've got, have had a number of successes with the program, Carly's got a whole group, I guess, now of students that are ready to jump in and take some training. So it's nice to see that as success breeds success, so to speak. And we've had people that have gotten jobs, and one of our accessibility ambassadors did a great job with some advocacy on the night ride program to make it to provide an accessible vehicle for folks with disabilities that need that assistance late at night. And so we can have some real tangible successes we can point to, and that seems to be generating interest for more students. So that's really exciting.
Brian, speaking of architects, could you tell briefly describe an accessible amenity in the New Hampshire that was not there in the old one?
Sure. Obviously, just thinking of the parking, I'm thinking of just from getting there, the parking is in much, much closer proximity to the facility, and there's more of it. We've tried to just eliminate almost all steps, or if there are steps, if there's an adjacent ramp access, so we're not marginalizing people by sending them different, splitting them up. Inside the facility, one of the things I think of many times is the induction hearing loop system. And I know we really struggled with the designers and engineers on this, can we really include this technology in a facility like this and not negatively impact other sound, acoustics and things like that, with the system. And we did. The engineers, they decided, okay, we finally got people to agree, yeah, we can do this. It's not as complicated as we think, maybe. And so that's another hearing loop system we have on campus. And so that's obviously a facility that serves a very broad range of people. We think of elderly people, young people, all ages, and the
general public.
General public, yeah. It's so it's a great venue, and in that regards, and so
Great.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, I'd like to kind of loop us back a little bit to the A-Team. As we talked about in our first segment, this is a group that's a part of the Disability Planning and Action Committee on the University of Iowa campus that looks at some of the accessibility issues that are important. And I don't know, this is always one of those questions where it's just kind of fun to brainstorm. I don't know if the committee is at a stage where you've really charted out some short and long-term goals, but I am wondering if there are some things that any of you, this is just anyone that wants to answer this, seeing on the horizon in terms of promoting or continuing this accessibility and this momentum that we seem to have going for us right now.
Well, I think there are some clear long-term objectives that we're going to try to reach, and the DPAC is a committee of people who are positioned in different roles at the university. So there's a broad reach for that group, And so we can take, we can help them find their way to, big picture questions like purchasing and procurement, for example, things that have a big impact campus-wide, parking and transportation, those kinds of issues, so that there's a sense of the university not just as an academic institution or a cultural place, but there's this sort of end-to-end awareness. So all day, every day, trying to make sure that everybody can get the most out of their experience, regardless of what they're here to do.
That's great. I mean, I think that's and that is going to have to be a long-term goal, I'm sure. I mean, I think that's a big systemic thing, and I know I'm really looking forward to going to talk to Deepak. As we haven't talked about the Council on Disability Awareness. I'm a member of that, as are a number of us here we've been fortunate enough now to be asked to present at DPAC a couple times a year, and I think one of the things that we're going to be talking a little bit more about is just the incorporation of disability more and more into just the university's overall diversity picture. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation, and again, I think that's a very much of a big picture, long-term process.
We don't have much time, so this question is for any one of you. Do you see other universities striving to do what we're doing here?
Absolutely. I just want to very quickly shout out to our colleagues in the Big Ten. We're part of the Big Ten Academic Alliance, and we've got some great colleagues all across the conference who help us, we help them. It's a great collaborative system, and I think it's a trend that's really trending nationwide.
And a shameless plug is that I was fortunate enough to be able to pilot an accessibility 101 training kind of thing that Todd and Kirk and their colleagues put together with other colleagues around the Big Ten. Is that something that's out there for people to grab if they want to, or are you still kind of in the demo phase of that?
I think it's pretty much ready to go. We've got a few things to iron out on it, but the hope is that it will be widely available to anybody who wants to learn a little bit about issues surrounding accessibility and disability in higher education. And I suppose if they really wanted to, they could probably visit itaccessibility.uiowa.edu if I can get back to it and put the link on it before this airs.
Great. Well, we'd sure like to thank everyone.
Yeah.
We really are running out of time already. These conversations go quickly. That it's really great as a person with a disability that works for the University of Iowa to have a group of committed folks to accessibility. So I want to thank you all for not just for coming to the show, but for what all of you are doing on a daily basis to make this a more accessible place and a more accessible community.
And as a person with a disability who attended the college in the 80s, I give you kudos for the accessibility that I did not have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks all of you for viewing this
Yes.
week. We look forward to another show next week and hopefully a couple of Iowa wins in the process. Good night, everyone.
Good night.